Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a little bit, but we have people joining. Our attendee number is just rising and rising. So we're just going to give people a couple more minutes here to just get signed on and connected with us. But welcome. We're so excited you're here. I'm seeing City of Lakewood is here, City of Roseville, the York region, Morro Bay City Manager. Oh, Scott Collins. Hi, I know Scott Collins. Great to see you. Welcome. So we've got it looks like a good mix of people here.
And I will add in, I see folks from Davenport, our certificate program. Hi, Rose, Kobe. I'm seeing other folks as well. Welcome.
And while we wait, everyone, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Just say kind of who you are, where you're from, and if you have any questions or anything like that.
We've got representation from all over the place. That's so awesome.
All right, we're going to give one more minute, and then we're gonna get started.
There was a question about whether they should be able to see one another, and they should not be able to see each other, correct?
No, that gets very chaotic.
But you can chat with each other in the webinar chat section. You just won't be able to see others. Unfortunately, you just get to see our faces.
All right. My clock reads 1:05. Should we get started, team? All right.
Let's jump in.
Hi. Yeah. Hey, everyone. It's great to meet you all. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to hang out with us and talk about comms and public engagement. Today's session is called Communications and Public Engagement. How are they related? And it's brought to you by CitizenLab and the Davenport Institute at Pepperdine University. So today, what we're going to do is we'll do some welcomes and introductions, and then Maureen and Pooja from Davenport will talk about the differences between public engagement and communications, how they fit together, how to think about them, as well as some of the broader outlooks for each. And then Amanda from CitizenLab will go into some of the tips and tricks and using case studies from our work across the country. And then we'll save some time for Q&A. So in the meantime, I think it's available. You can ask questions. There should be a special Q&A button. You can ask questions. And we're also going to be doing, because we are all about engagement, we're going to be doing a few polls kind of spread throughout the presentation. And we'll also make those results public afterwards as well. So jumping in, we'll do some quick introductions. So I'll start because I'm talking. My name is Ben. I oversee CitizenLab's work here in the US. I'm based in New York City. And a fun fact about me is I am a huge supporter and fan and rider of Amtrak, and I hate peanut butter. And I know that's super weird. Amanda, you wanna go next?
Yeah, you and I differ quite a bit on both of those. But I'm Amanda. I'm calling in here from California. I'm CitizenLab's community engagement specialist. So I work with cities across the US and Canada to set up their digital engagement platforms and translate their kind of engagement projects to both the digital and kind of in-person space. I have a background in local government, so I spent the last 10 years doing project management and community engagement in local government. And my fun facts are I completed my first Ironman last year, and I am a big fan of jigsaw puzzles. I'll pass it over to Maureen.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Maureen Tobin, the Executive Director for the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement and Civic Leadership. We are located down in beautiful Malibu, California. However, I actually live up in Northern California, not far from Amanda, in the city of Morgan Hill. I also have a local government background prior to coming to the Davenport Institute, where I worked as a communications and engagement director most recently before I transferred to Davenport. A fun fact about me is that I am a certified master hypnotherapist. Be careful, I might be hypnotizing you all now. And I love green smoothies. Oh, you can't see it because of my background, but I've got one right next to me. Not everybody really loves green smoothies. And Pooja, off to you.
Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Pooja Dijavana. I'm the Assistant Director at the Davenport Institute. So I work alongside Maureen. I'm located in Southern California and relatively closer than Maureen to our main office. I have a background in communication and education, as well as an interest in public policy, which brings me to the Davenport Institute. My fun fact, I love to ski. So I usually have a robust ski season every year. And my favorite book is Ulysses by James Joyce.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. So before we jump in, I think it's important to think about some kind of goals and takeaways for today's conversation. And so, I think throughout the presentation today, we're going to try and answer a few questions, right? Around when to engage versus when to communicate. How do you make the most of existing resources and capacity? We were chatting before this, and as the hosts and panelists, and one thing that we're seeing time and time again is limited capacity, particularly with local governments. And so, how do we make sure that everyone's using their time as best as possible, as efficiently as possible? Also thinking about what does success look like, both in comms and engagement. These are very big, broad topics, and we should be trying to be as clear-eyed as possible about what a positive impact looks like here. And then one question that we're anticipating is internal pushback. I think if you're on this call and Maureen and Pooja, or you're familiar with our work at CitizenLab, you may be the kind of evangelist for engagement in your organization. But not everyone is going to see the world and see engagement the way you do. And so how can we help you make the case for the value of both comms, but also engagement in your organization to move things forward? So those are some of the goals and takeaways. But before we go any further, I'd like to, Natalie, can we launch our first poll? We'd love to hear from you in terms of kind of what is your role? And whether you're with the local government or organization, doesn't matter. What are you responsible for? We'll give you all maybe 15 more seconds to answer this first question.
Yeah, I think we nailed it in terms of the capacity issue. We're seeing almost, half of our participants are responsible for doing both on top of everything else that they're responsible for. So it sounds like you're in good company and you're at the right webinar. Welcome.
All right. Well, let's end this poll. I think maybe we can share the results. I don't know if everyone can see it, but okay, cool. Yeah. So as Amanda mentioned, capacity, top of mind for everyone. So without further ado, then let's jump in. I want to pass the metaphorical mic to Maureen and Pooja. Floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Ben. So why does it even matter? I mean, communications, public engagement, it's all sounds very similar. We're talking to people, we're sharing information, but the reality is it does matter. Solely communication is often mislabeled as public engagement. And when we do that, we might be setting the wrong expectations, both internally and externally with our community. While we are building trust with both, we definitely build trust when we're sharing information with people and we're doing it in a timely and accurate manner. It's very important to understand that there is a difference between pure communications and true, authentic public engagement when we're trying to have a dialogue with our communities and we're really looking for input. An important thing to always remember is that communication can happen without true engagement, but engagement can't happen without communication. Next slide, please. So many of you might be familiar with the spectrum of public engagement that originally came from the International Association of Public Participation. This is a version of that you can see starts on the left-hand side with inform, going all the way to empower, where we're literally giving the community the authority and power to make decisions alongside us or the city council. What's important about this is just to see where the communication lies, and it's really in that informed stage where we're providing information, which is very important. And whenever we talk about the difference between public engagement and communication, I like to make sure people really get that I believe 100% in good, solid communications, but it isn't necessarily engagement. We're not asking for a dialogue. We're not asking our community members to help us make the decision. We're not looking for input ultimately that will help to inform decisions or influence a project or an outcome. If we're just solely giving communication, we're at the informed level, then we're not really in the true engagement. It may be the first step, but at that point, it's only engagement. And as we continue on forward through consult, involve, collaborate, empower, you can see that more and more we're bringing the community in, whether it's with technology, whether it's with in-person meetings, to really be a part of influencing the outcome for projects, initiatives, and decisions. Passing it on to Pooja now with the next slide.
So when we talk about public engagement, there's a few pieces, and it's hard to define because public engagement is different depending on where you are in the public engagement spectrum that Maureen shared. But a few things stay consistent. That public engagement is active. It is a dialogue between local government and your community, and it's built upon relationships. Relationships are a key piece of public engagement. How you have support with your community, who you're interacting with, how they can help assist and facilitate the process. It's focused on, oh, it's hard for me to, okay, I can fix that in one moment. Let me see. I'm going to, thank you for that feedback. How about now? Yes, no? Oh, shit.
Better.
Yep, Peter, we've lost you entirely now.
Okay,
There you are.
there I am. Maybe louder now than expected. So I will start again. When we think about public engagement, there are a few pieces that stay consistent and in common throughout the public engagement spectrum. Public engagement is active. It is not passive. And what that means is that it's a dialogue between local government and the community. It's built upon relationships that local government forms with the community, and whether that may be community leaders, whether that may be organizations, and it's focused on including the community in the decision-making process. It is asking community, saying, community, what do you think of X project, or how can we go about it? Oh, thank you to everyone giving feedback. It is collaborative. That means that in this exchange, you are communicating as well as collaborating with your community. You're taking into account their input. You're giving follow-up and feedback. And sometimes that follow-up can look like a thank you email. Thank you for participating in the survey. We're taking your feedback into consideration. Sometimes that means taking into consideration a serious point of feedback and adapting your plan if you are able. But in all things, it is focused on listening and incorporating input. Next slide. On the other hand, communication can be passive, active, of both. As Maureen was mentioning, that communications is the first step in the public engagement process that we were speaking on, and it's often a monologue focused on messaging. It's part of that process, but it's not usually collaborative. It is more community, we are saying this to you, we're informing you of X project or initiative, and in some ways it can be similar to marketing. Next slide. I hand it back to Maureen.
So we learned in our poll that many of you are solely responsible for communications and engagement on top of other responsibilities. Not unusual. I have lived and breathed that life, but we know that these responsibilities, both communications and engagement, often come together, as many of you are seeing. Sometimes they're separated, and they're often in different places. And because limited resources exist in so many of our agencies, sometimes other people get involved too. We may formally be the communications manager, director, engagement and outreach specialist, whatever the title might be, and yet frequently others get involved with it too, right? And I think the important piece of information in the who's responsible. Yes, you may be the ultimate responsible party along with many other responsibilities, but best of all worlds, we're working with all the other people in our organization because they all have a piece in this outreach and engagement process. They're all part of helping to share information and communications. So keep that in mind. Best if we're working together and we're not working separately. I've had that experience myself before, and it's better to bring everybody in, maybe even form a communications and engagement team so you're all working together. And that helps expand your bandwidth and breadth and depth if you have more people involved, particularly if you're a solo role. Next slide, please. So looking at this, trying to summarize the public engagement versus communications, but bottom line, it's what's the goal in what you're trying to do? In communications, as we've already shared, frequently the goal is this simply to share information, and I don't mean it's simple at all. A lot of thought goes into good communications and how best to share it. What should the messaging be? We need the community to understand and know something, and possibly even have a call to action. We're asking them to do something. We certainly saw a lot of that during the pandemic with all the rules and regulations that were going out. It seemed like often on a daily basis, asking people to wear masks, to not wear masks, to do this, to do that, stay home, don't stay home, let your kids go to school, don't let your kids go to school. That was really all about communications. We weren't asking for a lot of input in relation to that. Public engagement, on the other hand, has the goal of providing an opportunity for the community to really give their input, share their thoughts and ideas in a way that will impact, influence, change an initiative, decision, or project. And if there isn't that opportunity, and this is an important point, then we really shouldn't be calling it engagement. If we're simply sharing information, the public's input will not make a difference, will not influence the outcome or decision, then it's not engagement. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are many times, I was watching a city council meeting last night. This is what I do in my spare time in a city up in Oregon. And, I was so impressed because the community development manager shared that there was not an opportunity for the community to influence this piece of the project. It was required by the state to be handled in this manner. And it's so important that we're clear about those things. So difference is our goals ultimately. Are we just trying to inform, share information, and ask for a call to action? Or is there really an opportunity for the community to change, influence, impact a decision? Next slide. Thank you. On to the next slide.
Well, I think let's do a quick poll here before we jump in. Natalie, do you want to show that out? All right. So how is communications and engagement structured at your organization? Is it centralized? Is it each department does their own thing? Or is it a mix of both? And literally 15, 20 seconds to answer these this question. All right, now let's wrap it up and can you show the results? All right, looks like it's a hybrid of both. Thank you, everyone. Maureen, Pooja, floor is yours.
Maureen, you're muted.
Thank you. So as we were just discussing, the biggest difference is whether we're looking at a true dialogue and partnership and an opportunity for the community to really influence the outcome of a decision. And when we're doing authentic and true public engagement, it really is looking at community members as collaborative partners. We're the experts, yes, and oftentimes it's hard to imagine that we would go out to the community when we feel so much expertise around an issue or project. Why would we go to the community who doesn't necessarily have the expertise? But so important. That's why we're here. We exist because of the community. And so the community and the input they can provide is truly valuable. And in authentic public engagement, we're really partnering with our community. We're building trust in that process, and we're building relationships that can endure as we move forward, not just with this project, but on into other projects. So that's how we would look at public engagement from a broader perspective. Next slide, please. When we think about public engagement in this broader way, we really want to look at it as a very long-term strategy, both long-term in terms of perhaps one project, but also long-term in terms of it is all about building relationships, building trust. And the work we do today on this initiative is going to definitely influence and be a part of the experience as we move to the next project or initiative or decision. We want to make sure at any time, whether it be a project, whether it be initiative, or if we're just going out to our community to talk with them and to be with them and to build relationships, we want to make sure that we're involving the right stakeholders, which is an important part of the process that takes some time and effort. It's not quick to decide that, who needs to be part of this? It should involve several people. I always encourage, as we're trying to think of the right stakeholders, to even bring in different stakeholders to think about who are the right stakeholders to be in the room or a part of the process. Definitely community engagement, public engagement, requires some difficult conversations. Oftentimes, I would say almost all the time, it's hard to get through a good, authentic process without some difficult conversations. And I always like to say that good public engagement is messy, because when we go into it, we may have a set thought of the outcome that we're looking for because we're the experts, right? But in the process of good public engagement, a lot of different thoughts and ideas may come out that don't necessarily gel with the outcome the experts were thinking of. We've got to be willing and able to do follow-up. We need to make sure people know that their input and those conversations that they were willing to have with us, their willingness to take surveys and so forth, that there was a purpose for it. And as Pooja mentioned earlier, whether it's a thank you for participating and it's going to be 6 months now before anything happens on this, or if it's actually being able to describe thank you for all of this information. We heard this and this and this, and here's how it's going to be used. Here how it's ultimately going to influence what happens. So important. Good public engagement takes time, a lot of time. And that's fine, because communications may take time, but not necessarily. Turning it over to Pooja now.
So when we think about communication, and this, you may be sensing a theme throughout this conversation, is that in communication, you're thinking about conveying information, which can include distilling information from another source and adapting it to your audience. So whether that may be taking news that's coming from state or federal level and communicating it to at the local level. It could be informing the public about a community issue or providing regular updates on a community project. So as Maureen mentioned, that update could mean that we are in the process and it will take 6 to however many months to come back. And it can be, in terms of time, it can be even faster. You're getting communication out there, whether digital or non-digital, whether it's print, in any capacity. It works at a different pace sometimes, and efforts could be similar to marketing when you think about communication. They can be these communication strategies, and I saw on the poll results there are many folks in communications on this call. As you know, they can be highly effective in conveying important information and prompting required action. And again, that action could be participating in a survey. It could be giving information about where folks can provide feedback. However, it is not public engagement. It's the start of it. It's that informed stage that we were speaking about. So often it can be misconstrued or misunderstood as public engagement. And that's where problems and challenges are more likely to arise in the community. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at some of these challenges, because there are some. Oh, I'm seeing a question. We will definitely get that. So when we think about challenges between public engagement and communications, there are some that are just shared, that there's a resource investment in both. As I was seeing in the poll results, many of you may wear multiple hats at your organizations, and that is an element of resource investment, your time, staff time, as well as materials that may be needed. Often we may see internal or external apathy to the project and the process itself. As many may be aware, it sometimes can garner negative feedback, and you will definitely receive that feedback, whether it's in public comment or email or social media or wherever else. Both may require a bit of troubleshooting, depending on where you are along in the public engagement process or the communication process. And sometimes it may be difficult to determine if it is successful. When you think about communications, you're putting information out there. How are you measuring success? And thinking about, if those folks are in comms, you send an email out there. Are you measuring success by open rate, by click rate? It can change how you measure success, and sometimes it may be difficult. Likewise, in public engagement, a challenge, or often it can be a challenge, is that it's multi-department. If you are the communications individual and you are communicating on a project that involves planning and transportation and utilities, you're coordinating amongst all of these different departments, and sometimes one of the departments may send out their own communications. Sometimes there may be other public engagement processes that overlap. So often it involves multiple departments beyond the communication department, beyond the public engagement department, or if it's shared, both. And in both, errors can lead to distrust, whether the communication, if the information is incorrect, or if, one thing we mentioned earlier was about follow-up, that if you go through a lengthy public engagement process and there's no follow-up, there's no update to the community may be wondering, well, what happened to all of that? Where did my feedback go? Was it incorporated into the project? And that may lead them to potentially hesitate before participating again. So as we mentioned, follow-up is key, and it can help overcome some of these challenges, at least in distrust and building relationships. Next slide. And it's important to note in public engagement, when Maureen says it's messy, it really can be messy. People may think public engagement has this upward linear trajectory, and it is a lot of redrawing of the line, a new line coming in, multiple department perspectives, and it can be difficult. It takes time, as anyone who's gone through a public engagement process may know. Takes time. It takes collaboration within amongst your departments and with the community, seeing the community as a partner, and not being attached to the outcome, because the process may be messy and the outcome you may have anticipated may not be what you receive. So allowing the process to unfold for it to yield the outcome that it is meant to yield from your community, and seeing the community as a partner in that decision-making process is key. I'm going to pass it to Maureen. Back to Maureen.
Thank you, Pooja. So just to kind of summarize this piece of our discussion this afternoon or morning, depending on your location, ultimately, public engagement is about really partnering with your community, which we've stressed a couple of times now, really seeing them as an equal collaborative partner, knowing when to bring them in as a partner, because ultimately this helps us build stronger communities and greater confidence in our local democracy. And I hope we would all agree that is so important. And again, defining that difference between, is this engagement or is this communications, is so important in setting the right expectations. And some of you may push back a little bit on our definition of what public engagement is. That's okay. What I would stress with you, though, is make sure within your organization you come to a common agreement on what good public engagement is, and then make sure you have that same agreement with your community, so that when you are in the midst of good engagement, the expectations have been set appropriately. And when you're not engaging, you're simply communicating, those expectations have been set as well. And now we're going to move on.
All right. Thank you so much, Maureen and Pooja. That was really helpful, that distinction. So I think we've got another poll now, and I see in the chat and some of the Q&A, people are asking for examples. Well, I have some good news. We have some very specific ones coming up. All right, so we've got about 30 seconds for the poll, and then we're going to move because we want to save some more time for Q&A.
And remember, you can select multiple options here.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Amanda. All right, 5 more seconds. Get your answers in, and then we'll share the results, and we'll jump in to some examples. All right, looks like a healthy mix across the board. That's really great to see. All right, so Amanda, without further ado,
yeah, thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of where the rubber meets the road here. The city of Seattle is sort of the perfect example of what Maureen was just talking about in terms of engaging with the community and building relationships and partnerships. One of the things that the city of Seattle is in the process of doing is a 2-year comprehensive plan update. And they have both a digital engagement platform where they are sort of centralizing all of their engagement, but they're also working very closely with community-based organizations. They have formal agreements with those organizations to do outreach to sort of target demographics. And one of the tools that they're using is survey. And so they have launched this survey early on in their engagement effort, and they asked a number of questions, about their comprehensive plan update. But one of the questions they asked, along with demographic information, is around preferences for participation. Like, how do you like to participate? And they asked questions around communication preferences. How do you like to be communicated with? So really kind of seeking early on to hear from people and not making assumptions about how best to reach those populations. The other thing that they did is closing the feedback loop. So everything from that survey got put into, you can see here on the lower left-hand side, this survey analysis tool. It is an interactive sort of feedback loop with all the survey results that allows members of the community to cross-filter. So you can see, what do renters think about these questions? What kind of feedback are you getting from, women or minority groups? And so for them, really both on the front end, asking those questions, finding out how people want to be communicated with, and then closing the feedback loop and reflecting out what they're hearing from people. And I will share in the chat a link to their platform so that you can see more. And the next example we want to show is the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And this is an example of the way that they're doing in-person engagement and sort of linking in-person engagement with their online engagement platform. So the first thing that they're doing is meeting people where they're at. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, they're at a football game and they've got, an opportunity for people to engage. That's a way to catch people who normally wouldn't be thinking about or aware of your engagement efforts. The other thing that they utilized was the QR code on flyers, on posters, out in the community when they're, tabling at various events. They're utilizing the QR code to link people back to their digital engagement platform. And again, having a sort of a landing page where you can have all of the information and engagement activities and making it easy for people to know that it's there and access it is really crucial. They also took a multilingual approach. And so you can see their flyer here is in Spanish and English, their engagement platform is in Spanish and English, and they're really kind of helping to make it as accessible as possible by being in multiple places, having multiple languages, and then linking the in-person and online engagement. So that's one example from Lancaster. And then the last example is going to be using your digital tools to communicate out. So we're working with the city of Norwich, Connecticut, and you can see in the upper right-hand corner, that is the city website. And your city website is often already a trusted community resource. And so having resources and buttons on the website, you get additional validity to those offline tools. And so that, a Norwich 360 button in the upper right-hand corner takes people to their engagement platform. And they're doing that they're linking those two platforms together through this button. We also have widgets, and there's lots of different ways, banners on your website, but again, using your existing platform as a communication tool. They're also working to connect with their local media. This is a partner in your toolkit when you're doing communications, getting press releases out, keeping the media abreast of what's happening and the new tools and resources that are available. And we'll share a link to that article, but they did, targeted outreach. So Norwich here, an example of, how they're doing communications to point back to their engagement platform and support the engagement efforts that they're doing. The next thing that I want to talk about, as we talk about capacity, is tips and tricks, what ways that we can make our lives a little bit easier. So the first tip that I have is be strategic with social media. I think a lot of people find social media intimidating. It's a lot of work. It can be kind of a time suck for people, and not always knowing what channel should I be on? Should I be on every channel? I'll start with the first bullet point here. The last bullet point first, you don't have to be on all channels. We highly recommend that you find one, maybe two channels and do those channels really well. Also, don't just post to post. As a consumer that there are people coming for your attention in all different directions. So when you're posting, have a call to action, have something that you want people to do. Give them a reason to pay attention to the post that you're putting out there. We also highly recommend having visuals. On average, posts with visuals receive 3 times more engagement than the posts that don't. So have a visual, have a URL sending people to a place, to take an action, find this information, provide this feedback, take place in an engagement activity. And then the last tip is, cross-posting. Use your partners, reach out. Is there a neighboring jurisdiction or a partner organization that you can reach out to? Hey, let's make a deal. I'll share your post if you will share mine. And that's a way to get sort of broader access and amplification of your message without having to spend money, on Facebook for paid advertising. So highly recommend, just sort of thinking about social media in a more targeted and strategic way. Next slide. The next tip and trick that I have is always have a landing page, whether this is a page on your city or organizational website, or if it is a separate online platform. Every project and program should have a landing page and an easy to remember and easy to enter URL. So again, when you're doing that outreach to your media, you're doing email outreach, you're doing social media outreach, you have a link when you're saying, hey, learn more. It's not go to our general website. It's here's exactly where you need to go to get that information. So all of your communication points back to that single URL. Make sure you're keeping it up to date. Really, it makes your life easier if you have a single place to send people for information and when they have questions, rather than needing to hunt around or retype the same email over and over to answer the same question. If you have answers on your landing page and you're keeping it up to date, you just keep sending people there. You also want to make sure that you have a place for people to ask questions or provide feedback. So whether that's an email address or a feedback form, sending people, providing people a way to kind of interact with you is really important. And the last thing I'll say is make sure that it's mobile friendly. Over 85% of the US population has a smartphone, and it is more and more becoming the primary way that people are accessing information and engaging with information. So if your site or your landing page is not mobile friendly, that becomes a deterrent, a barrier for them interacting and getting that information in. And then the last one that I'll say, the last tip and trick that I have for you, we can go to the next slide, Ben, is simplify your life with templates and checklists. There are those, I know a lot of us who aren't necessarily communication professionals or engagement professionals, but there are ways that you can utilize the tools and resources available to you from people who are communication professionals or communication professionals to create templates, create checklists. You send out to your planner who is running a engagement project around a development. Here are the 5 things that you need to do, and I'm going to give you templates for each of those things. So it's a way to kind of build your communication and engagement team. You're reaching out and getting other members in your city or organization to help with communication and engagement, and you're giving them the tools to do it. So you can see here, we've got sort of a template for Facebook. The orange bots there are where you fill in your own information, and you're essentially kind of helping people who maybe have never written a Facebook post before. You're giving them a template so that they are learning along the way how to do that. If we go to the next slide, actually one of the resources that we're going to share with you today is our communications guide, which has checklists for various phases of your engagement process. And we're going to stick a link in the guide as well. And this is a communication plan for community engagement. If we go to the next slide. Oops. Oh, you're opening the link. Thanks, Ben. So here's an example of what we're offering, of what's in this guide, and it's a resource to you. Here are the 5 things you should do when you're launching a new project. Here are the 5 things that you should do when you're updating on an in-progress project. And then finally at the end, here are the 5 things to do when you're wrapping up and closing out a process. So again, utilize checklists, utilize templates. The goal is to be doing engagement and communication. And so this is a great place to start. It's a great, great first step as you're learning that process. So we're excited to kind of share that resource with you and encourage you to use this as a starting place for creating your own templates and checklists within your organization that are tailored to what the goals of your organization, really has around engagement and communication, or communication on engagement. And with that, I'm gonna pass it back over to Ben.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was really great, and I think it's really helpful to kind of hear the high level, the theory, from Maureen and Pooja, and then see it in action in some of these examples. So, thank you to all of our panelists. So we've got about 14 minutes left or so, and I've seen a bunch of different questions in the chat. So we're going to start with the Q&A first, but if you left a question in the chat, we've been taking notes, and we'll make sure to answer them as well. And what I'm going to do is kind of read them aloud, and Maureen, Pooja, Amanda, just kind of jump in if you have a if you want to answer it. So first question from Quentin Wilson. So does anyone have examples of engaging community members in the process of prioritizing desired public or nonprofit sector outcomes? and determining how to best measure progress on these outcomes.
Can you repeat that question again, Ben?
Sure, and maybe this is
listen.
more for the Zoom for the group, but basically the question is it's talking about engaging community members and prioritizing, I guess, specific public or nonprofit sector outcomes, and determining how to measure progress on those outcomes. Maybe Quentin, if you could provide a bit more detail there, we can come back to that one. Yeah, so actually there's two questions that popped up that I think we should address first. So one was a question around, Maureen, this is from Marina Puja. You mentioned, how, when working in local government in particular, you all are the experts. And the question is, when do you ask the community who, may not be an expert on a specific issue? Let's say it's a COVID protocol or something like that. But in some circumstances, the community does know, or their perspective is really valuable. Can you talk a little bit about how do you know when to kind of tap into community expertise and kind of how much to open the door to community feedback on an issue where their perspectives would be really valuable?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think first of all is the simple question to remember: is there really an opportunity for the community input to make a difference? Will it be able to influence a project? Will it be able to ultimately perhaps even change a decision, or at least influence the decision? And I think we forget about that sometimes. We're so busy talking about engage. And engagement is really about, asking for that input. So that's the first thing. COVID was a perfect example. There really wasn't a lot of opportunity to engage because there were so many directives coming out, and those were being made by true experts. Well, I guess we could argue whether or not they were true expert decisions and directives. However, there was probably an opportunity to engage with the community, but the timing wasn't quite right about how would be best to be sharing this information. Are there conversations that we should be having about how to better support our community during these difficult times? And some communities were doing those things, but it was a difficult challenge. I think the key thing is if the community really ultimately can help to influence a decision, or help to impact the way a project is delivered, if there's some set parameters within which there is a lot of flexibility, then yes, the community should be engaged. We should be talking to the community, and the community should be talking amongst themselves to come up with the best outcome. And I know that sounds very general, but I think actually it's specific, and that's the main thing we need to think about. And then remembering that whether or not we may not know what expertise lies within our community, and they don't necessarily need to be experts on the topic. Someone put in the comments to be experts on what the community is about and what they want and need.
That's great. Thank you, Maureen. And then there were a couple of questions about evaluating comms and engagement efforts. Pooja, Amanda, I don't know, have you all seen any best practices about this, or can you talk about how you've seen, particularly, I guess, local governments evaluate or assess their comms and or engagement efforts?
I could jump in, and then Amanda, if you think of examples, you can hop in. I think with any process, whether communication or public engagement, it starts when you are planning it with your team members, with your departments, to determine what is your desired outcome, what are you hoping to achieve, and then based off of that, determining what is the success. So one example I gave in communications is the goal of this email or communication piece to reach as many people, and that is defined by how many emails are opened, and then that becomes your point of evaluation. Is it how many respond to a ask in the email? And then that becomes your point of evaluation. So you set, based on your goal, what the point of evaluation would be. And likewise with public engagement, is this public engagement at a level in which the community is collaborating and are actively involved in choosing one of 3 pre-selected options and you're basing it off of a certain percentage of engagement, or are you basing it off quality of feedback? So I think it varies based on your team, your project, what you're hoping to achieve from that project, and then how, based on that, how you measure it. So I'm going to pass it to Amanda.
Yeah, no, Pooja, I was just going to absolutely echo what you have to say. I think thinking about those goals early on before you start your engagement process is really crucial, because you also need to be thinking about what kind of data do I want to be reporting out, and I need to make sure I'm asking the right questions and collecting those data points, from the very beginning. And when I'm working with cities, our client cities, early on, we're talking about what are the goals of engagement, and I really encourage people to think both quantitatively but also qualitatively. Is the goal to increase trust? Well, how do we measure that? Is that a sentiment survey that goes out maybe at the very beginning and at the end of the survey? Is it is it greater collaboration and participation? So maybe it's the number of people that are showing up to meetings at key decision points. And then also those quantitative goals, beyond like we want X number of people to take our survey, maybe it's we really want to increase engagement with our, and we want to increase diverse engagement. And so we need to be asking demographic questions so that we can know who is engaging with us and have the ability to report on the successes of hearing from and reaching diverse community members. So there isn't really a one size fits all, but there certainly are a number of different data points that cities have engaged on. And perhaps that's something that we can do in a follow-up email is here are some of the kind of the measures of these metrics that you can use to measure success. And perhaps Maureen, Pooja, and I can kind of collaborate on what that resource might look like. But these are really important questions, and the fact that they're being asked is really key. Let's think about what does success look like? What are we trying to find out? And then how do we create an engagement process to get the answers to that? Also knowing, as both Maureen and Pooja said, that it's messy, and so you may get halfway through and realize, wow, we have to completely we were looking at the wrong thing, and sometimes that happens to you, and you're needing to collect different information. But that's a great question. I don't know if Maureen, you have anything you want to add?
I always have to just add too that we can't always determine success by data we're collecting in engagement. Sometimes it's more soft, more qualitative, and we may see it over time. We may not see a true success in this moment, but over time, we realize things have changed in the community, that we feel more trust being developed and built. So I just always like to add that in as well.
Yes. So really quick. So we've got a couple more minutes, and I've got at least 2 more questions for the panelists. But before we do that, we have a question in the spirit of true Q&A. We have one more poll question for the group. Natalie, do you want to launch it? And it's very on topic. Thinking about, how do you measure your engagement effort if your engagement efforts are successful? So please fill that up. And then we'll take a second to show the results. Another 10 seconds. And this is good. We'll try and share some of these stats and some of the best practices that have been shared in the chat in our follow-up email. So please, if you have thoughts or ideas that you're not getting a chance to share it or your question answered, please leave it in the chat and we'll make sure to include it as well. It's been really great to see everyone's, how active the chat has been. All right. Can we share those results?
Yeah, and in the chat, we're getting some great stuff. It looks like Ashley had shared the ease of implementation after a decision has been reached. That is huge. Being actually able to actually move forward a project, that is absolutely a sign of successful engagement. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's a really crucial one. The project can actually happen.
Totally. Okay, so another question we've been getting. So it's been about, it was asked in relation to school boards, but I think it can go towards a city council meeting or something like that. And it ties to, how do you, I think a couple of issues. One is, how do you navigate, whether it's communication or engagement or a mix of both, particularly contentious issues? And what do you do when kind of the existing mechanism for providing feedback is an in-person meeting that involves someone speaking at people for 2 minutes, and it's not really a good environment for dialogue. So do you have any kind of tips or tricks on how to approach either contentious issues or to support or augment kind of the traditional in-person town hall, school board meeting, that type of thing?
Well, I would just jump in and say that at the Davenport Institute, we wouldn't consider 3 minutes at the microphone engagement, which is what happens at school board meetings and city council meetings. True engagement, involves sitting in a room that's conducive to conversations amongst residents themselves, sitting at round tables, not a speaker at the front of the room who's either, directing information at you or, just giving bulleted answers, but conversation and dialogue. And so I think that's the important thing. By the time you get to those public hearings, hopefully in the best practice, you've had lots of opportunities to have these less formal dialogue opportunities with the community. And so the 3 minutes at the microphone is just commenting, on a process that's already happened.
Yeah, and I would just say, I worked on highly contentious projects when I was with the city of Santa Cruz, and again, using some of our tips that we have, like have a landing page. Transparency is really crucial. You want to have all your information in one place so that people can easily access, correct factual information. So really making sure that you have sort of online tools that can support your process. And I agree with Maureen, approaching those issues head on. It can be really scary to engage with community members who are mad at you or disagree with whatever you're trying to bring forward, but creating ways for people to have their voice heard is really crucial, so that by the time they're getting to speak in front of the decision body, they're not screaming and yelling about nobody is listening. I haven't had a chance to weigh in. So really just doing your due diligence and hitting it head on is really crucial. Those would just be 2 tips I have.
Amazing. All right, well, last question. This comes from Robin. Robin's asking in this case about how do you work with the disabled community? So that could be low vision or blind people or people with mobility limitations. I'm thinking about how do you engage them? But I think the question can also be a little bit broader as well, which is, people who aren't online or people, how are you reaching people who are not easily reached, and that's either online or offline?
Well, I'll jump in. I think first of all, in the online space, ensuring that all of your online tools are accessible, and that can be, high contrast colors so that text is easily read. Being able to layer on tools that allow text to be read out, have text in multiple languages, not having images that have content written on them so that they can't be easily translated for people who may have vision issues. And then in terms of the in-person engagement, again, this is a great place to engage your partners, is to go out, if you've identified that this is a group that you need to target, finding those community organizations who either offer services to members of that community or are already actively engaged and have relationships with those community members. That is the best way to reach them, because bridges have already been built there. They have tools and resources. They know how content needs to be adapted so that it can be easily accessed. So again, making sure your online platform is accessible, and then finding those community partners who can help you to engage those populations.
Yeah, I really echo what Amanda's saying. Those trusted leaders and advisors within varying groups within a community are so important. We need solid relationships with them, because they can really be the make or break difference in being able to engage with hard to reach communities.
All right. I think that might be the end of our time. We so appreciate you spending the last hour with us, and and hope that you found some valuable tidbits to take away. We had sort of a lot of content we tried to shove into a small amount of time, but you'll be getting follow-up emails for us with some of the resources we mentioned. We'll do a little brainstorming around some metrics and get back to you as well. And Ben, I saw you were muted, but do you want to jump in with any final words?
Just fumbling around Zoom. No, I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. And as Amanda said, we'll send an email out shortly. Yeah, there'll be more from us soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Have a good day.